40 years ago, The Professionals arrived on television screens across the country and was an instant hit. It was an action-adventure police drama focused on CI5, Criminal Intelligence 5. The lead characters were Bodie, Doyle, and their boss, George Cowley. But the second series saw various issues come to a head. One actor started to get cold feet. Meanwhile, the other nearly put the entire production into jeopardy, whilst the show itself was put on trial for its use of violence.
The strength of this organization is its anonymity.
Many people are saying it has too much strength.
This is the 40th anniversary retrospective of Series 2 of The Professionals.
We're an action programme, we're popular, we've got 14.65 million watching us, and the action element of it is something that they obviously want. If action is taken out, then there are 14.5 million odd people who are going to go somewhere else for it.
In 1978, the major scare in the TV industry was violence. The previous year, Dr. William Belson's book, Television Violence and the Adolescent Boy, asserted that violent programs were a major influence on society's behaviour, something that self-appointed media watchdog Mary Whitehouse and the National Viewers and Listeners Association used to support their concerns that the show was violent, uncouth, and thoroughly unsavoury. In America, a similar campaign had caused Starsky and Hutch, one of the main influences on The Professionals, to drastically tone down its violence. With this in mind, London Weekend Television issued a few directives to change the show's format. One was to make the series more urban than it had been before. The first series oddly had many episodes set in the countryside due to the show being run out of a manor house near Pinewood Studios. This was eschewed in favour of a base in Wembley and more urban settings near London. Abandoned dockyards in particular proved to be fertile ground for action sequences. Another directive concerned violence, and new producer Ray Minimer decided to subtly shift the focus away from violence and instead replace it with big-budget action set pieces. Even though The Professionals was a post-Watershed show, it was also decided to limit the use of bad language. Bodie and Doyle could still call the bad guys bastards, but only to underline a few dramatic moments.
You bastards!
A narrative change to improve the pace of the show was the abandonment of the office scenes, which were a mainstay of the first season. This meant that writers who were in trouble with their scripts couldn't simply cut to Cowley's office and insert dialogue-heavy scenes to resolve plot issues. CI5 now had to resolve their problems whilst on the move, which made the episodes feel faster paced. To this end, Cowley's limp was also removed, and his excessive predilection for malt scotch was also toned down. Two iconic cars, the Ford Escort RS2000 and the Ford Capri, replaced the various British Leyland vehicles that were infamously unreliable throughout the filming of Series 1, and became the main cars used by Bodie and Doyle. Bodie's silver Capri in particular became a central part of the show's iconography, and The Professionals became the show that cemented the Capri's reputation as a cool and desirable car to UK viewers. When you look at some of the stunts in the show, it's not hard to see why. The RS2000, on the other hand, was probably the better handling motor, although due to poor interior lighting during car scenes, the production team ended up having to hurriedly add on a sunroof. At times in the first series, the dubbing of main characters was obvious and often unintentionally comical. For Series 2, microphones were used on set for the first time, which allowed for much more naturalistic dialogue, as well as improvisation, especially between Martin Shaw and Lewis Collins, who are now fully settled into the lead roles, and love to wind each other up, both on-screen and off.
Shut your foot off.
The most noticeable aspect of the show which was revamped was the opening title sequence. The original title sequence was one of the things the show had received complaints for due to the implied violence and clear visibility of firearms. Instead of showing Bodie and Doyle traversing an assault course in a random warehouse, the new sequence would be much more slick and polished, using some distinctive locations in London, with more of an emphasis on the main characteristics of the three leads. Cowley is depicted as very taciturn and businesslike, Doyle is informal and energetic, and Bodie is shown to be smartly dressed and intensely focused. The silhouettes of the three lead characters are used very effectively throughout. At one point we're even briefly shown a grid of several other silhouettes which are implied to be of other CI5 agents. The most memorable parts of the titles though are the opening and ending shots. The sequence starts with a cityscape reflected in a plane of glass before the glass is shattered by a Ford console as the theme tune kicks in. Then at the end, the three leads quite literally walk into the camera, Cowley in the middle to show his authority. The new titles were definitely a big step forwards for the show and ensured that it would capture and maintain the viewer's attention and interest. The 10 episodes of Series 2 were produced in the following order. Rogue by Dennis Spooner. Cowley is working with the head of Special Branch to nail a balding criminal called Culbertson. A witness agrees to testify against him, but unfortunately he is murdered just after coming off the train to London. The man who shot him turns out to be Barry Martin, played by Glyn Owen, one of the original CI5 agents, a close friend of Cowley since the war, and a mentor to Bodie and Doyle, who is trying to prevent his own involvement with Culbertson from being exposed. CI5 must uncover his betrayal and stop him from fleeing the country by any means necessary.
Why?
Well, maybe I took a leaf out of your book.
What does that mean?
Okay, maybe I've broken the rules. But that's what you've been doing all your life.
I break the bad rules, the stupid rules, but not the good ones. They can never be broken.
Hunter Hunted by Anthony Reed. In this classic episode, Doyle is given an experimental sniper rifle to test.
Guard it, Doyle, guard it with your life. In the wrong hands, that gun could create an instant disaster area anywhere.
Thank you, sir.
Doyle then goes out with a lady friend of his from his days in the Force who's trying to get into CI5. After a night of passion, he drives home only to discover the steering damage and his brakes cut, ending with his vintage E-Type exploding on him.
Can't leave you alone for a minute, can I?
Somebody just tried to kill me. Yeah.
I thought they hated the car.
To make matters worse, he goes home to find the rifle has vanished, stolen from the oh-so-secure cupboard on the stairs that he left it in. Now, with the help of Bodie, he has to get the gun back, whilst avoiding becoming its next target.
I always knew it, you know. What? You're as mad as he is. Who? The nutter! Could be anywhere, couldn't he, eh? 1,000 yards. What's that? A hit. Easy, couldn't miss.
That's right, but he won't, will he? Well, not yet, anyway. He's teasing me. He's not just a nutter, he's a sadistic nutter. He's setting me up.
Yeah, and you're just going to sit here and take it like a traditional nanny goat.
Till he comes out to get me.
And then what?
You'll save me.
First Night by Jerry O'Hara. Ah, nice calm opening. Laurie Johnson's got the trumpets out on the score, and it's a beautiful day on London's South Bank. Oh, thank God that didn't last too long. An important Israeli minister, Asher Biberman, is kidnapped outside the festival hall, dragged into a hovercraft, then into a helicopter, and then into a car, and finally into a suburban house, where he is held prisoner. Due to the possible political nature of the snatch, CI5 are involved, and have to figure out where the kidnappers are holed up, based upon piecemeal clues.
You know, I sometimes wonder where you get this incredible insight into the criminal mind.
Well, I'm suggesting.
You go on munching bread and fried grub, you're not going to make old bones, you know.
It's beautiful, gets the adrenaline flowing.
It's clogging yourself up with cholesterol. Pull over, I'll take the wheel. I've just realised the incredible risk I'm taking. You're jam tart, your heart could just pop at any minute. Come on.
Get off! Go on, have the other half. That's what you want, isn't it? I know.
Want it? I wouldn't be seen dead eating that.
It's because you forgot to bring your vitamins.
The Rack by Brian Clemens. Originally titled An Inquiry into Violence, The Rack starts with CI5 trying to bust famous boxer John Coogan and his younger brother Paul, who are involved in all kinds of criminal activity but have used their fame to avoid conviction. Unfortunately, it goes very wrong. Not only do CI5 find no trace of heroin that they were tipped off about, but Paul dies in CI5 custody after provoking a single punch from Doyle. The remaining Coogan is unsurprisingly pretty hacked off about his dead brother and claims that CI5 is violent and lawless, and a court of inquiry is set up, as Coogan hires a morally righteous female barrister Geraldine Maver to shut down CI5 once and for all. Interestingly, this episode is intended as a meta-narrative and a response to critics of the show's violence.
That was an accident.
Yeah, that's right. He ran right onto my fist.
Now look, Ray, I was there, right? He came at you, you turned and belted him. I mean, it could have happened anywhere. Pub brawl anywhere. It could have happened to anyone.
Well, it didn't happen to anyone, did it? It happened to me.
You only hit him once.
I see. Oh, well, that's all right, then. You mean if I'd hit him twice, I could have killed him twice? You know what they made of me, don't you? Do you know what they've made of us? Eh? Well, it frightens me to death, Bodie.
Man Without a Past by Jeremy Burnham and Michael Armstrong. Bodie's sitting down for dinner with his girlfriend one evening when suddenly a horrific bombing takes place. Bodie survives, but his girlfriend is in a critical condition. So vengeful Bodie starts to investigate without Cowley's permission to figure out if he was the target or if it was actually meant for someone else. Also, there's a mysterious car tailing his every move. There's actually a great story about the filming of this scene, which makes it even funnier. The team at Mark 1 Productions had erected a fake bus stop to film with. The problem was, of course, that real buses would repeatedly stop there. Legend has it that after a few takes, all of the extras hired to applaud Bodie got on board for a day trip into London, leaving the rest of the crew in stitches. In the Public Interest by Brian Clemens. In a generic northern city which looks suspiciously like Derby, crime is at an all-time low thanks to Chief Constable Green, but after the local gay community is repeatedly attacked by masked vigilantes, Cowley sends Bodie and Doyle in to investigate corruption and intimidation amongst the police force. This episode is based upon the real-life story of James Anderton, who was Chief Constable of Manchester at the time.
We have nothing to go on but conjecture and rumour.
And my instincts.
Unfortunately, George, I cannot put your instincts on paper. I cannot present them as lucid arguments.
A couple of undesirables. Villains, I'd say.
Anything solid against them?
No, sir, but my instincts tell me they might be trouble.
I like instincts, Giles. They can't be put on paper. And desirables, eh? I don't want them in my town, Inspector.
No, sir.
Not a Very Civil Servant by Edmund Ward. A construction firm called Temple Blake Limited are on trial for corruption and taking bribes in exchange for government housing contracts after a council estate they recently built starts to fall apart. A government minister is in on the whole thing and wants to keep his reputation intact, so he hires CI5 to keep a watching brief on the trial. It ends up getting more than he bargained for.
Now, have the two of you read the briefing of this Temple Blake rubbish?
Yeah, watching brief, whatever that means.
It means that you two get your best suits out of pawn, have them cleaned and pressed, and if you don't own velvet gloves, buy some. Watch, listen, and learn. On Bodie, there are ways of asking people questions without removing their teeth. For one thing, it makes for clearer diction. Well, I'll see you both up at Fairgate. Knowing the way you two drive, you'll probably get there first.
When I find Cowley's physiotherapist, I'll tie his toes in a reef knot.
Cowley's good, admit it.
Yeah, Cowley didn't get out of a strange bed at 5 in the morning with a hangover.
You want to play?
Couldn't take you on with chopsticks.
The Stirring of Dust by Don Houghton. A former double agent for the Russians, Thomas Darby, yes Darby not Dolby, returns to the UK for the first time in 20 years to see his daughter from out of wedlock. However, Darby has made many powerful enemies during his career who all want him dead, and he knows the name of the banker, a powerful UK establishment figure who's financed his espionage, who Cowley wants to discreetly remove from the country. Can Bodie and Doyle find Darby and discover the traitor before the traitor catches up to him? Blind Run by Ranald Graham. Bodie and Doyle are trained heavily ahead of a very special assignment. They have to escort an important Middle Eastern politician who is visiting Britain incognito to a series of rendezvous points. There are fears of an assassination attempt though, and Cowley ominously warns them that if anything goes wrong, CI5 can't help them. Bodie and Doyle are on their own. Fall Girl by Ranald Graham. An East German film star and former lover of Bodie's, Marika, visits London, leading her and Bodie to rekindle their romance. Unfortunately, Marika's husband finds out about this and decides to frame Bodie for the murder of the East German Secret Service chief. Bodie is arrested and becomes the pawn in a deadly political game.
Excuse me, I'll like some flowers.
Oh, thank you very much.
Pleasure. Carry on.
Roses? Red roses? £1.
Yeah, all right.
Thank you.
He's in love. Bodie, he can't be. There's a man acting suspiciously, standing in the middle of the street, holding a bunch of red roses and talking to himself.
Early on in the first season, Martin Shaw felt incredibly frustrated with what he felt was the one-dimensional nature of the show and his character, and he sent in his letter of resignation just 6 weeks into production. Unfortunately for Martin, he had signed a contract which held him to work on the show for 4 years, and Mark I Productions insisted on holding him to it. The first series unexpectedly became a hit, and the producers realised that Shaw's performance was partly responsible for this, so that understandably they wanted to keep him on. At the end of Series 2, Martin became much more outspoken, voicing his dissatisfaction with the show to the press, explaining that it was preventing him from taking up other roles which he wanted to do, especially in theatre. Martin did this in the hope that Mark I Productions and LWT would release him from his contract before filming resumed again. Predictably, it didn't work. Despite their relationship getting off to a rocky start, Shaw began to form a genuine off-screen friendship with his co-star, Lewis Collins. But Lewis was causing big problems of his own. On the 6th of November 1978, Lewis turned up to the set of the production block's 11th episode, Backtrack, with an injured right leg. He attempted to pass it off as a minor injury he got from playing football, but it soon became obvious after a trip to the hospital that the fibula in his right leg had been fractured. What actually happened was that Lewis, who was fascinated by paratroopers, decided to visit a parachuting school to learn how to do it. Unfortunately, Lewis picked the wrong parachute for his weight and ended up injuring his ankle. This created a big problem for the production crew. They suspended production on Backtrack, and initially the idea was floated to temporarily write Bodie out of the series and introduce a new character to fill in for him until Lewis was fully fit again. But the problem here was that producers wanted to sell the show abroad, especially in the US, as the show was designed to be broadcast in any order without continuity issues. Many countries therefore wouldn't have been interested in episodes not featuring Bodie. So the decision was made to wait until March 1979 to shoot the third series and finish off the remaining 3 Series 2 episodes. Collins had to write a letter to the producers and crew members apologising for delaying production and admitting that he had been careless. In terms of viewership, Series 2 didn't do quite as well as the first series, and one explanation for this may be that most of the run was pitched against the third series of Starsky and Hutch. The Professionals generally beat its American counterpart in the ratings, but having the two similar shows running in the same time slot split the audience. The average viewing figures for The Professionals dropped from 17 million in Series 1 to 14.25 million in Series 2. The strongest performing episode was Hunter Hunted, the season premiere, which had 14.65 million viewers, putting it 5th in the charts for that week. Series 2 in some aspects was the golden era of the show. It brought it into some new territory with a variety of different and engaging stories, whilst polishing the format and removing some of the early instalment weirdness that had plagued the first series. But the problems surrounding Shaw and Collins behind the scenes would have lasting consequences for the rest of its run. Plus, there was a looming threat that no one had seen coming. In August 1979, the ITV network shut down due to industrial strikes, and nobody knew how long the dispute would go on for. All of a sudden, ITV was starved of ad revenue and it looked like LWT might decide to pull the plug on the show.
Get over there, fast!
I'll get these.